moderated by Program Director, Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development, Akintunde Babatunde. A round of applause, please, as he makes his way up the stage. He's going to be calling up the members of his panel, and then we'll take the conversation from there. Over to you, Akintunde.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Don't let CGID regret having lunch before this session. So, good afternoon, everybody. Right. Thank you very much for coming along since yesterday. This is the second to the last session. Before we start, I wanted to explain the reason why we have the session and the people that are coming up to speak on the session. We have started a conversation on health, on media freedom, on climate change, on conflict. And if you notice, a lot of people have been saying the media, they should do this, they should do that. So what we're going to do today on this panel is to see the anchors of media and the leading managers of newsrooms to talk about what they have been doing and how they can balance these, with making profits to be able to do even more. And up to join me on this stage is Sebenzile Nkambule, the Program Director for African and Middle East Media Development Innovation Fund, MDIF. Then I would be calling Musa Sangarie, the Regional Program Manager for West and Central Africa, Internews. I would also call up on stage the publisher, the cable newspaper, Simon Kolawole. Also, to join us on this panel is Makmid Kamara, the Africa Regional Director, International Fund for Public Interest Media. To join us online is Kayode Ladende, the Executive Editor, TVC News. And to also join us online is Toun Okewale Shunaya, the co-founder and CEO of Women Radio 91.7 FM. Right, before we leave, we are hoping to get Mr. Kayode Akintunde, the Managing Director of News Central, to join us. So we'll get right into the conversation. Good afternoon, everybody. And I wanted to give an interesting, geographical spread of this panel. South Africa, Sierra Leone, Nigeria,
and Sierra
Leone. So I wanted to give that spread, and we have Nigeria, and also the makeup of the organizations that they represent. So the fund media and also invest in the media. They support the media. It publishes, and they fund in public interest media. So that gives you that spread. And then we have the online, Madam Toun and Mr. Kayode, who are media executives in radio and then broadcast TV. So you get to see that spread. And you all have been listening to the way that everybody have been placing the media up on the spot about the media should do this, the media should do that. So, Sebenzile, let's talk about, you and your organization. People don't really know what it is, so let's get onto it. What is MDIF and what do you do?
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to everyone. And thank you to the hosts for having us. This has been a great day so far. I only arrived late last night, and it's my first time in Nigeria.
Did you enjoy Nigerian jollof?
It's delicious. I'll be back. It's delicious. Thank you. The MDIF, the Media Development and Investment Fund, is an organization that, and it's within the name, right? So Media Development Investment Fund. So we do both development work, supporting media capacity building through our programs all over the world, but we'll also invest in media as well, which is not a space that lots of organizations play in. And I know when journalists hear media, or hear investment media, they get rather nervous, right? Because ours is to tell stories, and we don't think about incredible the work that we do oftentimes in commercial terms or as businesses as well. But that is changing. It's changing quite a bit. We obviously, because we do think about our work as impact investing in particular, so we think about the impactful work that organizations are doing and fund with that mindset in mind. We also understand that the organizations that we support and invest in work in particularly difficult markets as well. So at times, as you would know, you may have all sorts of currency, fluctuations in terms of valuations. You may have unrest. You may have all sorts of other issues or threats to press freedom, as we see that being on the rise again, and that it does make it difficult. And so if a partner comes back to us and says, so we give either a loan or equity and says, we're struggling a bit, we need a month or two before we can actually meet our repayment or whatever it might be. And because we understand the space that we're working in, we're able to actually provide that support. It's a conversation you wouldn't necessarily have with a traditional lender or with a bank, because for them it's about the bottom line. For us, it's an understanding and an appreciation that we live in very difficult and challenging times, but this work is important. Democracies depend on good, independent media, and so it is our responsibility, not only our responsibility, but others as well who have access to resources to actually fund this work and invest in this work. And the MDIF, at least for almost the last 3 decades, has existed to do exactly that work.
Yeah, I'm just going to cut you in there. So you invest in the media, and there has been a lot of, questions that the media is not sustainable and also profitable, in the sense that you invest. As an investor, you want to get returns, So it's been 3 decades according to you. So do you think that the African media landscape is profitable to the extent that they receive investments and they are able to return the investment with profit over a few years? Do you think that's been the experience for your organization?
It hasn't been easy. But yes, investing in media is sustainable because not doing so is not sustainable, right? Not having...
Is it sustainable? Like financial? Is it profitable?
So profitability and sustainability don't mean the same thing, right? And we can debate this for hours on end. Yes, it is sustainable. This is how we've been able to work as MDIF, as an international organization, work in a number of challenging and difficult markets for as long as we have been. We have a number of examples. We have some clients in this very country as well, in Nigeria, that one can draw on. We work in South Africa, and have a pool of clients that we've been able to support, and they cut across platforms and different media to do the work that they do. But as I started my response, it's very difficult work. It's difficult because the markets they operate are not difficult, but we must do the work and we must invest and not pull out.
It's difficult, and the market it makes it also very interesting. All right, I'll go to Simon Kolawole. It's been many years of the cable experiment. Has it been profitable? And if it has, whatever the response is, how do you manage the pressure? So there's a trending news, and the cable is not publishing it, trying to gather facts, and your readers are saying, oh, the news media is asleep. So they want to get the best of news from you, but they are not able to pay for it. So have you been profitable? If not, how do you generate revenue to pay salaries and to keep the best talent to keep doing the work?
Yeah, very tough question. Profitable. I would say we are profitable to the extent that we are not taking loans to pay salaries or run operations. But we are also not declaring the kind of profits that a bank would declare or some other business concerns. We have 2 major revenue streams, advertising and services. Under advertising, we have the programmatic ads that are served by the big techs. We have the native ads. That is direct advertising. Under services, we produce content, video, text on a commercial basis. we do events. We have a book publishing arm. Now, the one where there's real pressure is the direct advertising, where the advertisers feel that because we have given you adverts, there are some contents that are negative, that are adverts that shouldn't run. And we've had to battle with that a lot. It got to a stage we decided to disengage from doing business because the pressure was too much. We do our story and they come and say, with all the business we are doing with you, why did you run that story? So there's that pressure. And talking about the readers, Mr. Delolojede said something 12 years ago. He said, information wants to be free and people want free information. There's so many people serving news, serving you contents, and people don't want to pay. That is the reality. So in terms of reader-generated revenue, we are not having any of that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And and that's interesting. You talked about advertising. And I think that when we talk about media profitability, there's always that conversation about adverts. And the most profitable media organization in the world, perhaps the New York Times, they have, a lot of non-journalism, products where they get the bulk of the revenue from. The examples that you've also mentioned, nothing is journalistic about your revenue. There are services that are not necessarily news media related.
Yep.
And that's that's one dynamic that has been, so people talk about adverts, but they forget about the fact that the non-journalism product that is able to attract value to fund journalism that is in public interest comes with a lot of thinking and ideation. How have you been able to manage these dynamics, especially in, and I'll give context, the Cable is a Nigerian publication. Before the current, Naira floating and subsidy removal, the NBS said about 6 million Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. And what that meant was at the time they could not afford $2 a day. At that time, $2 was about 750 Naira. Today, $2 a day, if you, depending on where you get your dollar from, should be about 3,000 Naira. I mean, that's pretty much even been, very magnanimous with the rate. So if 166 million Nigerians, before, when dollar was 700, if 160 million Nigerians could not afford $2 a day, today, probably we've expanded that window, and we have many more poor people, who can't even afford, let's even say 5,000 Naira a day. What it then means is that what is important to me as a Nigerian is just to get the next money to eat and not to pay for news, right? And that means that the public that you're serving is not really your customer. So how have you been able to manage this? And when we talk about adverts, how does this dynamic play out?
Yeah, since news is free, and people are still buying data, I think we are still serving them one way or the other. Maybe we are not serving them in a way that is profitable for us because we are not generating revenue from their engagement with us. But also, if we look at it, even when we are talking about this dollar thing, $1 a day and all those things, it's also a bit, using dollar to measure poverty is also a bit, because what $1 can buy in the US, what $1 can buy in Nigeria, $1 may not be able to buy it in the US. So people for as long as people are still interested in getting the news, and we are serving that purpose, I believe that we are engaging at that level.
Right. Thank you very much. I will go to Makmid, and because you fund, public interest media, and I wanted to ask why you funding public interest media. Mr. Kolawole said that news is free, and we should serve the public whether or not they can afford it or not. So why are you funding public interest media, and what have you done so far?
Thank you very much, and thank you to CGID for having us here. The International Fund for Public Interest Media exists to address some of the issues that Simon and many other people here are facing. Now, just in 2020, just over 4 years ago, just one statistics revealed that for just one aspect of the newspaper industry, this is newspapers, of the media industry, which is newspaper, $30 billion were being lost by just one sector of the media, which is newspaper. It didn't even include radio or any of the other platforms, yeah? Now, a lot of studies have also been conducted. which show that media, public interest media as we know it, is eroding and is losing a lot, not just quality, but also the power. It is losing its power to influence changes within society, not just because a lot of people in the sector are leaving. There's a hemorrhaging of quality journalists from the sector because they cannot be paid. There's a hemorrhaging of quality journalism because editors cannot even buy quality paper in which they can publish their publications. Newspapers, media houses, television stations cannot pay rent. So you have a situation in countries like Nigeria, like Ghana, like Sierra Leone, where I'm from, where outlets cannot even buy fuel for the generator. So they are shutting down or they are rationing their broadcasts. The amount of money that was going into a range of other development interventions, whether it's governance, and this is not to undervalue those interventions, was not commensurate with the number of support that media, which is the heartbeat of any thriving and democratic society, was getting. 0.03% of overseas development assistance was going to media. But when you look at all the other sectors that rely on the media, everybody else was getting money. And then they will come to the media institutions and media practitioners to help elevate or send the message. So a healthy information system was under threat. Independent public interest journalism or media was under threat. And we've heard Simon mentioning how advertisers were threatening newspapers or publications. We have all heard about media capture. So media capture is not just about state capture, it is also about corporate capture. So the International Fund for Public Interest Media was established to introduce a paradigm shift in how media is financed. We don't see ourselves as media development actors, we see ourselves as media financing mechanism. Because that is the gap that we have seen that exists across the world. We operate in over 40 low and middle income countries, and with the sole aim of ensuring that we inject core flexible funding and grants to media, for the media houses to operate. The reason why we're emphasizing on core flexible funding is because a lot of the interventions that come to media are pegged to particular themes. If you want to get grants from a particular foundation, it has to be linked to the thematic priorities of that institution. Yeah. We are saying that is not what the media needs. The media needs core flexible funding. What does that mean? It means that if Simon has cable to run, Simon wants to do thorough investigative work that is not linked to anything, but that will serve societal value, Simon should have money that he will be able to give to the journalists so that they can go into the field, conduct the investigation without having to call Simon when they are there because credit has run out. The fuel in the car is not there. The tire that will take them, or the camera. I was a journalist, by the way, so I'm saying this from the experience of a journalist. I'm not just now a media founder. So we've worked in situations where you go to the field, and the actual journalists don't have the money. They rely on the units within the outlets that generate funds. So the advertising unit or the other program unit. And those units then have to control the power, right? To determine how much production cost is given to the journalist. So that reduces the amount of time they spend in investigating. That reduces the quality of output that you will get, which is of value to the society. And we've seen how not just civic space, but the democratic space is shrinking. And one of the vanguards for protecting that space is the media. But the media has been starved. So that is why the International Fund is in, to ensure that we reduce the starvation of the media. We help in ensuring that through this fund, through this mechanism, the media is able to survive. So our core goal is media survivability. Right. And I'll come to the others later.
Thanks, Makmid. And while you were talking, I was going to ask you, how many media organizations are you currently funding in Africa? And you said funding and grants. I was just going to ask, so what does it take to access these grants, from IFPIN?
So we're currently operating, it used to be 11 countries that I cover as director of the African and Middle East, but we've added 12th, which is Palestine. And I'm very proud that we added Palestine to our portfolio because of how the media in that country was starving and was being specifically targeted. So we've added, we have 12 countries. If you don't mind, I will mention those countries briefly. We have Ghana, which is where I'm based, and which is thanks to the government of Ghana and the Ghana Journalists Association and all the actors. I see Professor Gazeko in the audience. They've been leading the cause of calling for the attention that is needed. So Sierra Leone is another country, and we have a different model for Sierra Leone. Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, DR Congo. I see Benedict here as well on the platform, in the hall from DR Congo. Niger, which is just next door to Nigeria, Namibia, South Africa, and Sebenzile will talk about the support that we've been providing to MDIF for the Amplify South Africa grant. Tunisia and Lebanon. So these are the countries, and we chose those countries, and I can go on to explain the rationale for these countries. But in Ghana, we're supporting Joy News, for instance, which is one outlet I'm sure many of you know. In Sierra Leone, we're supporting a national fund for public interest media because we don't believe that supporting outlet directly alone could address the systemic problems that the media confront. We want to ensure that at some point in time, media should have access to flexible funding that is not necessarily through major foundations or funds like us. They should be able to access them locally in a contextual and flexible way. So we're supporting the National Fund in Sierra Leone through a very broad coalition. We're supporting Ghetto Radio in Kenya. We have over almost 15 grants, just to summarize, across Africa and the Middle East, and more coming.
Thank you very much. I know that those who would like to get support from you, they are writing those things down. So after now, they will come to you. So I'll go quick online to Mr. Ladeinde from TVC. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay, sure.
Yes, I can.
Oh, thanks.
I'm muted now.
Thanks a lot for joining us today. So when we talk about funding media, a lot of time television don't always comes to mind. When we talk about supporting journalists, a lot of time broadcast journalists are not always in the picture. So I wanted to ask, sir, how is it that the TVC, has it been profitable? How has the revenue been like in the past couple of years?
Okay, so just like you said, we seem to have a bit of a different narrative from that you just narrated. For example, TVC, we've been so big on public interest story. As we speak, we have a partnership with Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism, where they also share their grants with us to do some stories. That's to also let you know that in the last 3 or 4 years, TVC reporter had to even win some awards, and definitely it comes with some goodies, just to let you know that public interest story is quite important. And talking about profit, the good news, I'm sure this is also an unusual way of reasoning. The good news is that what a lot of people have seen social media as a pain in the neck of many traditional media. But for us, we see it as a very big avenue. Apart from live transmissions that we do, which is a major source of revenue for us, it will shock you that the digital platform is next after the traditional way of making money from adverts and advertorials. That's to let you know that for you to remain relevant, for you to be watched, and for you to increase your subscriber base, you need to earn that trust. You need to watch the kind of stories that you are churning out. So TVC, in the overall analysis, I can tell you this is also in the public space, to let you know that in the last 2 years, we actually exceeded our target in terms of what we want to.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, from revenue. So you look of fear. Can you hear me?
You froze for like 4 seconds.
Some 2 seconds.
Oh, now you froze again. Okay. Internet.
Yeah, apology. This is that quite a lot of things are changing. Yes, the cost of buying diesel has skyrocketed. Even if you're on band A, if you know what Nigeria, it's quite expensive to do all those things. But the good news is that a lot of things have changed. This is not one of those days where you tell your children, forget journalism. It's for the poor people. It's for those people who do not earn salary 5-6 months, and all kinds of, negative stories we hear about the profession. So by and large, I want to put it to you that quite a lot of things have changed for good. And I think TVC is one of those few stations who probably are not doing badly.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that the point that you made about journalists, the era of journalists not getting paid for months, people not wanting to be journalists because of the pay, I think I like that point, and I'll pretty much just take this to Musa. So Musa, you work with a lot of journalists, and you fund the media also in Africa. Have you been working directly with journalists, fund them, or do you fund media development organization, or do you fund media organizations themselves? How do you do your funding?
Thank you for having me on this panel, even though I was not expected to be here. But I think this is a subject that is at the heart of the work of Internews, and I'm very excited to share some of our experiences. First and foremost, we need to understand the various types of media and how we position ourselves in terms of supporting them. You have commercial media outlets that are very much for profit. And you have community radios that are serving community people. So for Internews, most of the work that we do is directed at community radios. In as much as we fund individual journalists, like freelancers, investigative journalists, but we focus much more our support on community radios because we think, that's a media outlet that is mostly neglected, but is very important in terms of disseminating information to the population that is marginalized and also vulnerable in society. When you look at funding for the media, for us at Internews, we look at it from the point of view of media viability. This is a very big concept. Probably we could spend like several days in terms of discussing this, so I don't want to go into all the details in terms of unpacking the concept around media viability. But I will always say that for media outlet, your biggest customer is your audience. And for you to gain that audience is trust. And trust is built upon quality programming. So if you have quality programming, then you build trust with your audience, and your audience grows. So the bigger the audience you have, then the bigger the possibility for you to get more funding.
Right.
So that's one key thing.
Let me take you on that.
Yes.
Do you think audience realistically translate to revenue in today's world?
It can. Because when advertisers want to advertise, for example, to media outlets, they tend to look out for media outlet that has, for example, the biggest audience. That's one thing that you look out for.
Let me take you on that again. Would I, as an advertiser, want to publish with an influencer that's got millions of followers and engagement, more than traditional platforms, even though they have the reach? There's like a switch now. Beyond the big tech thinking that, there are also influencers who are competing, the trust of people. And we've seen, consistent decline in the trust that people have in the media. So if I could probably advertise on YouTube directly, or promote my post on Facebook, promote my business on Instagram, why do I have to go to a third party, a media organization, just because they have the reach that cannot even compete with the reach of digital media?
Well, it depends on the demographic that you want to reach. For me, that's very important. Because as an advertiser, if you want to reach community people, then you ask yourself, which media platform or which media outlet is the best to help me reach that particular type of demographic.
Right.
If you want to reach young people, then mostly you have to look out for online media outlet because you have a lot of young people that are engaged online.
Right.
But in some cases, you combine online media and traditional media.
Right.
If you're a very smart advertiser, because at the end of the day, the minister here or somebody from government was saying that majority of Nigerians still get their information from radio.
Right.
So by just focusing on one outlet means that you are missing out on a huge number of other audience. So it's a question of how do you combine. So for me, you have to look at demographics, you have to look at your target audience, and that determines which media outlet you want to fund and which media outlet you want to engage.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll come back because there was a report that says, advertisement component of revenue for media organizations in Africa is less than 40%. So what that means is that can't even take care of salaries. But I'll come back to that. I'll go to Madam Tong. Hello, Madam. Are you there online? Hello? Okay, if she's not there, I will just go to Simon because there was an interesting point from Coyote about the era of, I like that really interesting point, that the era of journalists being owed salaries or not getting paid or people not wanting to be journalists because of pay. And I wanted to ask, sir, when local media, when they support in the best way to train talent, to pay the best way, those who are not even owing here, when those talents are ripe, to even contribute and give back, then the next thing that happens is that they are looking forward to the Musas of this world who will pay them in dollars for stories, so they leave you. Or what they do is that international platforms who are looking to tell stories from Africa, they tell you, I'm sorry, sir, thank you for the platform, but I have to move on. Then they move on. Then what happens is that you start taking from the scratch. So how has it been? How has that impacted the quality of the work that you do? And how have you been able to keep up retaining talent where you can even pay? Because what international media will probably pay their interns, that's what they probably want to pay, the best of talent that you have in Africa, and they would leave just because it pays better to earn in dollars. So how do you manage that?
You are touching a very raw wound. We've lost quite a number of good hands in the last 2-3 years. I'm happy, but I'm sad. Happy for them that they got the opportunity. The salaries that are being offered today in dollars was before, maybe when we started, was something we could match. It was 172 naira to $1. So if somebody offered you $1,000 then, how much was it? 170,000 naira. We could match that. But somebody offers you $1,000 today, that's 1.7 million.
You could match it. You could match it.
So it's a very wrong. We are being crowded out by the dollar-denominated salaries. So what is supposed to help the industry is also hurting us in the sense that we lost a good hand. We lose good hands all the time. And I'm sure that is also the experience of many other online newspapers. Because it takes a lot. We have this policy of mentoring people. Immediately they finish university, we take them, then we mentor them, and then they grow. We are being crowded out. And I'm scared. I have a WhatsApp group where they make fun of me. Anytime anybody from the cable wins an award, they say, you are going to lose this one soon. So I told them, I hope that you people get me a job when I shut down the cable. I hope you are going to get. Somebody was offered a job recently. If somebody offered me that kind of salary, maybe I would take it.
Wow. Oh, that's a very. That's a very interesting point.
We are being crowded out by the dollar salaries.
Right, and I also think that probably we have a lot of journalists here who are also trying to see the next dollar-paying job. So it's a very big issue that we will not talk about, especially talking about public interest. So I'll come back to you. You support in organizations you invest, and have you had challenges, where the revenue, because I think when we talk about revenue, it's different from being profitable, also different from being sustainable. They are very similar, but, distinct, realities. And what has been the experience, of the organizations that you fund, do they complain to you about, because it's easy when you're talking to them and say, we have this pool of funding to support you, and they say, yeah, sure, we are happy. Anybody is ready to sign contracts, just to get the money, but returning it, in terms of with profit is one also reality that is kind of really tricky. So how do you think this has been, how has this been the case, in your experience supporting organizations, and do they even meet up, with the required, deliverables that they're supposed to meet up, to be able to pretty much be eligible for the next round or the next grant and all?
Yeah, look, we work with a range of organizations, and from much smaller, only been operating, say, for a year or a little over, and big businesses employing, almost 100, say, staff members, for example, right? So they're playing in different fields. But some of the problems that do emerge are ones that I think are quite universal when you are operating a business. I think the challenge that we often see here is that, people want to focus on the core and the main business that they're in business for. So as journalists, they want to produce stories, they want to tell them well, use the tools that are most efficient for them and most impactful, and then be able, of course, to serve the needs of their audience. What then does become tricky, and I think also, we also give grants, but the donor world does have to account, I think, for the demands that they place on grantees, is that you have all of these demands, whether it's on reporting or limiting them in terms of themes, and because people want to remain sustainable, so if a particular funder says, we're now interested in climate, suddenly everybody shifts from writing about general stories, important stories, not that climate isn't, but now suddenly we're covering climate because we're chasing funding, which for us as an impact-driven and an impact-focused organization, we feel is counterproductive. I previously led an organization that supported investigative journalism, which takes a very long time to actually materialize and for there to be some results as well. So it's a very difficult field, but we also realize that that is a critical part of journalism that is required when you talk about connecting the dots, trying to help your audience understand complex issues, leading up to elections, or whenever there might be a shift of sorts, actually helping folks understand that, right? And that becomes difficult when we then say, but people aren't paying for this, or our subscriptions are low this time around, or we can't host events because of whatever the reason might be. And I'll wrap up here because I know you'll cut me off. What is important, I think, for us who play in this world, one, is to be quite hyper-local in our understanding of the dynamics that the people we partner with are experiencing. So I can't think about an organization that's in Johannesburg and think about them in the same way that I would a small organization in, say, Ethiopia, where they're facing very different geopolitical circumstances, right? So we need to be quite agile in how we understand those, but also need to hold the partners that we support accountable, because often, and part of how we are funded as well, it's a combination of resources coming from bigger funders, from other supporters, if pimping one of those as well, other players as well, who entrust an organization such as ourselves, that we will hold our partners accountable. So partners also need to be accountable, that if you said you're going to, say, pay back X amount, that you do so, and if you're unable to, that you communicate. But if you're committing to this kind of work, that you're actually able to do that and are taking care of your staff as well. So it is a relationship, and accountability is a key part of it. But I particularly lead in two very difficult regions, Africa and the Middle East as well. So to not be cognizant of the challenges, I think would be foolhardy.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that's very interesting. I would just go to Kayode. Ladeyinde. I wanted to ask you, because I think the TV is one very interesting model, which is mostly like business, and TVC is a business. So you talked about partnership with organizations like the Wole Soyinka Center, for public interest work. So, but beyond that, do you have, public interest programming, apart from that partnership that you have? If you have, how do you manage, a climate change story that is development, that is public-oriented, that will cost you 2 million naira? If there is no funding, 2 million naira for that story, would you go ahead when you have a political event that will probably pay you 5 million naira to cover? Which one will you take?
Okay, that's quite a very tricky one, but I'm going to be very realistic. It's two ways. One of the things that we have going for us is that the headship of Newsroom, that is Mrs. Stella Dean Jacob, that's the director of news and the editor-in-chief. One of our strengths is the fact that she will say that, let us not lose viewers. If we lose viewers at the expense of money, which is one of the points made by the panelists, is that whoever is bringing political rallies, bringing political program, if we lose that viewership, they may not come to us tomorrow. So there are times where we have to drop this idea There are times politicians want to take live program on our 7 p.m. news and our 10 p.m. news, our major program. We have to come up with a policy that irrespective of the enticement, we are saying no. Because people have the right to be informed. Just like the climate change you mentioned, just like we have a program we call Community Forum. And we discovered that this program has won us several awards. And this is a program where a lot of people have tuned into. So if they end up watching one road construction that is being inaugurated, that probably only the people in that state will tune into our channel, we will be losing more.
Right.
So we have found a way to balance it.
Right. Thank you.
We have found a way to balance it to say that, hey, we need the money, but let us not lose the viewers.
Right.
Make people keep coming back to us.
Thank you very much. And I would love to take this further, but I just want to allow one question from the audience because I think it's important. Okay. If I look at this place, they will say because I'm looking at you, I'm gonna go to the side. Oh, wow. She said I should take a woman. So yeah, I'll take you.
Good evening, everyone. This has been a fantastic discussion so far. I was looking forward to Madam Teo to come talk on radio because that's a space I also know how to play in. My name is Ejiro Mokoro. I'm the ED for Lightrain Media. Now, while you were talking, he asked a very fundamental question. And I think Madam Teo would have come in to say something significantly on that in terms of revenue. So the challenge radio has today, one of the conversation is, you talked about audiences. You talk about marketing to that audience. You talk about you managing public interest. And then there is all that contradictory conversation and say, radio is not public interest-driven journalism. Yes, we had that just a few days ago. So that contestation is pretty high. Then the question is this.
Right.
For radio, for example, where an anchor is hired to pull in audiences.
Right.
Then you have the marketer who is supposed to do what? Leverage on the audiences and market to the public.
Right.
But then management now insists that your job description is no longer just to pull the audiences. You're going to get the funding.
Right.
So from that perspective, I hope Madam Teo would have analyzed it. But
so
if
who are you directing the
have,
question to
I think
now?
I'm going to direct it to you because
Makmid.
you have a sense of all of that. So let me give it to Kamara.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So Makmid, that will be your closing. And then just go for it.
Thank you very much. I'm a bit surprised to hear that radio is not considered as a public interest media or outlet. Now, I have a bias because I started my career in journalism as a radio journalist. So I want to have that conversation with that person. This is an ICC case.
Right.
But just to give you a brief definition of what we mean at the International Fund for Public Interest Media, of what constitutes public interest media. And I'm going to read this so that I don't miss out on the key aspects. Now, at the fund, we see media, a public interest media, as one that exists to inform the public on matters that concern them or helps to ensure that power is held to account, holding power to account. Let that sink in. The second one is that it provides fact-based information in a trustworthy manner. The third definition or category of public interest media is that it commits to the demonstrable pursuit of truth, for example, through sourcing practices and the representation of the audiences that it hopes to serve. It is editorially independent, and that it is transparent about processes, finances, and policies that it uses to produce it. If any radio station that person knows that does not do this kind of thing, then perhaps that's the question. But these are the definition of what public interest media is. And for us who are in Africa and who operate with radio stations and interact with them, we believe that the majority of the stations and outlets do meet this category. Thank you very much.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate your attention. Unfortunately, Kayode said I should leave here. So I want to say thank you to Makmid for coming around. I mean, it's Sierra Leone based in Ghana, coming to Nigeria. That's a three-way road. Thank you very much. Mr. Simon Kolawole, thank you very much for the perspective. I sympathize for the loss of talent. I mean, we hope that, one can only hope and pray that, the media in Nigeria will be viable enough to compete with international platforms to be able to pay, globally competitive salary to retain, talent. Musa, thank you very much for coming around. Thank you, Sebenzile, for this, and thank you, Adeyinde, for coming around. They're still here, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.